moving along to the second paper, our second speaker will be Heather Hogue. Oh no, I'm sorry. Sorry. Negar Rokhgar. So Negar Rokhgar is a third-year PhD student at the Department of Art History at Rutgers University, and she specializes in the Italian Renaissance. She has also a Master's of Art from the University of Art in Tehran, which she received in 2011. And her research interests are in the artistic and cultural exchanges between the Islamic lands and Italy, especially focusing on those Islamic portable objects that have found their way into Italian collections. And she's going to be speaking about, well, the title of her paper is Squinches, Signifiers of Muslim Norman Integration at the Church of San Cataldo in Palermo. Okay.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Jones and Dr. Babale. This is really my honor to be here. Okay, so I am going to talk about, as Dr. Jones announced it, Squinches, Signifiers of Muslim Norman Integration at the Church of San Cataldo. The Church of San Cataldo in Palermo is one of the finest examples of Arab Norman architecture in medieval Sicily. Attributed to Maio de' Bari, the Emir of Emirs from 1154 to 1160 for the Norman King of Sicily, William I, the structure is adjacent to the ancient city walls at the center of Old Palermo. Up on an artificially made hill, San Cataldo features a plain stone wall exterior articulated by blind rounded arches and small pointed fretwork windows inserted in the rise of the arches. The church is embellished along its roofline with zigzag merlons and culminates with a row of 3 red domes springing from a rectangular raised base. This paper studies the vaulting technology applied in San Cataldo's 3 red domes and traces the appearance of this technology to early Islamic vaulting in Egypt, Syria, and Persia. First, I will present the historical and architectural context of 12th century Palermo and other areas of formerly Muslim-ruled southern Italy. Then I will discuss the influence of early Islamic architectural tradition on the structure of San Cataldo's vaulting. I argue that in its construction, there is a link between the architecture of the Norman conquered lands and the architectural traditions of Sicily's preceding governments. The 3 red domes of San Cataldo mirror this history of political and artistic exchanges between Normans of medieval Sicily and Muslims of North Africa, and specifically Egypt. Taken from San Cataldo, the Roman Catholic Archbishop of Taranto, the name of the church places emphasis on the region that witnessed a short-lived emirate in the 9th century. 2 Muslim groups dominated Sicily, first the Aghlabids of Ifriqiya in 827, and afterwards the Fatimids from 909 until the Norman conquest of Sicily in 1060s. The Church of San Cataldo overlooks the Piazza Bellini, close to the heart of the old city of Palermo, and is adjacent to the Church of Santa Maria dell'Ammiraglio. Commonly known as La Martorana, Santa Maria dell'Ammiraglio was founded, built, and endowed in 1143 by William I's father, Roger II, and his Emir of Emirs, George of Antioch. The Islamic building tradition in Santa Maria dell'Ammiraglio highlights the remnant of Muslim dominance on the city of Palermo. The painted Arabic inscription referring to the king and his vizier on the columns in the vestibule and the wooden door were made by Arab artisans, along with marble decoration on the floor and geometrical patterns in Islamic style on its walls, and they attest to 200 years of Arab control over Palermo. The fact that Norman kings not only preserved the Islamic vestiges, but also structured their monuments with the application of Islamic features reflects the multicultural audience of the government. As the Normans conquered Palermo in 1071 and completed their conquest of Sicily in 1091, they appreciated Islamic architecture as above an avenue of communication with our Muslim citizens, and in more practical terms, suitable to the climate of the region. San Cataldo continues the integration of Islamic building techniques into Christian buildings initiated at Santa Maria dell'Ammiraglio. San Cataldo is an enclosed squat-shaped church set on a raised plinth. Its high blind arches frame windows with elaborate Islamic star pattern fretwork decorations. The 3 decorated windows are open on each side, and a blind arch of lesser dimensions indicate the space between the nave and the altar. Embellished with cut stone crenellations, the Arabic merlons accentuate the Islamic character of the church. Merlons with ornamental or symbolic forms as cressing are transformed structures based on classical antiquity and battlements from the early Middle Ages, which were popular defensive devices found in Byzantine, Islamic, and Western city walls. Merlons remained chiefly in Islamic lands, and in the 12th century they began to appear in Norman Sicily, presumably as a reflection of formerly African Arab domination over the island. Above the merlons, 3 small domes are laid on a low continued tambour covering the central nave. Although the interior decoration of San Cataldo was never completed, it has a simple Byzantine Greek cross shape with an original pavement of marble and porphyry marquetry with mosaic and symbols of evangelists at the altar. The internal space is dedicated to a nave with 2 aisles and 3 bays, and culminates with 3 apses. The central apse breaks the rectangularity of the floor plan, while the 2 side apses are created within the space of the extremely thick exterior walls. The walls are articulated with pointed arch windows, and each window corresponds to a bay. The bare walls of the interior space expose the construction of the 3 domes standing on each bay and the flanking side aisles of the crossing vaulted bays. According to Jeremy Dummett, high stone walls and small windows, like those we see at San Cataldo, are among the most typical characteristics of Islamic architecture. Additionally, the enclosed space and simple exterior of San Cataldo are in complete alignment with common characteristics of Islamic monuments, which will be examined in this paper. However, one of the most striking characteristics of San Cataldo's architecture is its 3 distinguished red domes. Domes were among the most symbolic elements of Islamic, but also Christian architecture that could reveal the dominant religion of the region and power of its conquerors. By the end of the 7th century, and specifically in the construction of the Dome of the Rock in 691 AD, domes played a symbolic role in Islamic architecture and were thus frequently utilized architectural features in Muslim-controlled areas like Spain and Sicily. When Muslim forces conquered a region, they built mosques or converted local churches to Muslim places of worship by constructing domes on those structures. Thus, the 3 distinctive red domes standing out above the name of San Cataldo are the most dominant Islamic features of the church. They also indicate that, much like the Muslims before them, the Norman kings wanted to use architectural references to Islam in their church construction to indicate Norman and Christian dominion over the formerly Muslim-controlled islands. This can be a hypothesis also. To understand and trace the architectural models for the dome construction of the Church of San Cataldo, it is necessary to consider the vaulting techniques applied to carry the domes. For San Cataldo, the domes are supported by squinches, the technique that fills in the upper 4 corners between the basic square and the dome with corbel vaults or niches. Specifically at San Cataldo, a square base transformed in the first upper layer to an octagon, and then, with the support of the squinches, it carries the dome. Therefore, to understand the domes at San Cataldo, we must consider the emergence of squinches, which were used in Norman architecture, but was overall an uncommon architectural technique in Europe during this period. In addition to San Cataldo, there are other examples of domed monuments that utilize the same technique squinches throughout Sicily and in the broader Norman territory, which this paper will study. Other examples of this architectural technique in the Norman kingdom include the ancient church of San Giovanni dei Lebbrosi in Palermo from 1071, which is one of the possible architectural models for San Cataldo. At San Giovanni dei Lebbrosi, the red domes articulate the Islamic appearance of the church. Built by Fatimid workers on the ruins of an Arab castle, the church is located at the center of a palm tree garden. The arrangement of a dome monument at the center of a garden reflects the idea in Islamic thought that the dome is the vault of heaven and the garden around the building is a representation of paradise. The Kufic inscriptions on the interior columns, in addition to the Umayyad capitals of the columns and the fretwork decoration of the small windows on the exterior walls, emphasize the extent of the Islamic influence on architecture in Palermo. Another possible architectural model for San Cataldo is the Church of San Giovanni de Eremiti from 1142, also in Palermo, which features identical red domes. The previous structure was turned into a mosque after the Muslim conquest of Palermo in 831 by adding 5 unequal cupolas built by Arab artisans. Reconverted by Roger II to a Benedictine monastery in 1136, San Giovanni delle Eremiti was one of the biggest and most important monasteries in the kingdom. In addition to the presence of cupolas in both churches, San Giovanni delle Eremiti and San Cataldo, the domes are supported by squinches. Oh, sorry, it was late. Other domed monuments in the Norman territory in Apulia, specifically Bari, likely influenced the construction of San Cataldo. Like Sicily, Bari had briefly been a Muslim territory in the 9th century. However, Bari's geographic location as a mediator between the Muslim territories of Mediterranean lands and Sicily played an important role in its exposure to the Islamic culture and traditions. In this regard, the Duomo di San Corrado from 12th century in Molfetta offers a significant example of the application of squinches in this medieval cathedral. However, it is not the case with many other domed monuments. For example, the 11th century Church of San Benedetto in Conversano, which has an octagon base, and the mid-11th century Church of Ognissanti in the village of Valenzano, with its somehow similar appearance with the triple pyramids, are both domed monuments in which the domes rest on pendentives and not squinches. Just a brief definition of the pendentives. These are that the pendentives fill the curved triangular gaps between the 4 perpendicularly set arches. What we can elicit from these comparisons in body is that squinches were not easily found in Europe and are architectural elements that signify a strong Muslim integration. While we have already established the tradition of this architectural approach in Palermo and Bari, the square bases beneath the hemispherical upper structures of the domes on San Cataldo and the application of squinches tie the structure of the church, particularly to non-European architectural traditions. This technology has deep roots in the architecture of Muslim lands, where the prevalence of domes and subsequently the application of squinches introduced this device as an essential tool in the history of Islamic architecture. Squinches were initially developed in the palaces of Sasanian dynasty, the last Persian empire before the rise of Islam in Persia, today's Iran, where I was born, and other pre-Islamic structures from the 3rd century. They were invented as a solution for the problem of putting a dome on a square base. The initial use of domes on square bases in Persia was followed by simple structures which Cameron Creswell named canopy tombs, mostly in northeastern Iran and Egypt that date back to the 10th century. The structure called chahartaghi, or 4 arches, are characterized by domes resting on square bases with open vaulted side walls. Chahartaghis were initially used as Zoroastrian fire temples. Another early example of these monuments is the 10th century Ismail Samanid mausoleum in the city of Bukhara, Uzbekistan. A third example is the 12th century mausolea of Muhammad wa Sayyida Atika al-Jafari in Cairo, Egypt. The primary purpose of these early mausolea was to emphasize the place of a dynastic founder's burial. Moreover, the particular veneration of Shiism to the descendants of the Prophet Muhammad advocated for the demand for these domical monumental tombs. In tracing the development and transmission of squinches, we see that there are ambiguities in the relation between the squinches invented in Persia and the ones developed in Egypt. However, the technical and visual similarities between the two, as demonstrated by Jonathan Bloom, indicate a strong connection between the approaches of this type of vaulting. Furthermore, the population of both Persia and Egypt were Shia, hence the pilgrims and the routes to Hijaz, the holiest Muslim cities of Mecca and Medina, enhanced the transmission of these architectural elements and importation of artisans. Aswan al-Ghaus and Ghaus are significant towns and points of tourist trade on the way to the Red Sea at Al-Ghusair. The mud brick mausolea with dome squares from the 11th to 13th century in Aswan not only find their counterparts in Persian Tahartagis, but also in mausolea in Cairo. The transmission of squinches over the centuries and across continents becomes even more complicated when you consider that there are a few monuments in Syria that also feature early examples of this architectural element. The no longer extant minaret of Aleppo's Great Mosque from 1090 AD features a stalactite cornice similar to the minaret in Al-Mashhad al-Juyushi from 1085 in Cairo, which also features the earliest appearance of the stalactite decoration in niches in the cornice above the Mokarnas cornice. Therefore, Syria becomes another probable site of influence or conveyor for this type of architecture. In addition to the survived architecture in Syria as visual documents, the transportation of builders from Edessa to Cairo suggests the role of Syria as a mediator. While the precise later routes of transmission are obscure and the use of this evolutionary technique was widespread across Islamic lands, the invention of squinches is attributed to Persians in 3rd century AD. The small domical constructions still standing from the Sasanian period in today's Iran attest to the existence of dome structures and the architectural need to transition from square to circular spaces. This overview of the origin of squinches and their diffusion across Islamic territories during the late antique and early medieval period sets the stage for their appearance in the Norman West. In this regard, Charles Nicholas highlights the close architectural relations between the Islamic lands of North Africa, and particularly Egypt, and their counterparts in Norman territories. Nicholas focuses more on the similarities in dome construction and vaulting technology. For example, in the 9th century Great Mosque of Karwan in Tunisia, the stone dome rests on squinches and thus shows technical similarities with dome construction in southern Italy and Sicily. A comparison between the squinches in the Great Mosque of Karwan and the ones in San Cataldo reflects the corresponding vaulting technologies. Similar vaulting technology and types of squinches are used in both monuments. The appearance of squinches in Palermo, at one of the earliest surviving Norman structures, ties San Cataldo to the Islamic tradition of vaulting and indicates the conscious use of this type of architectural feature in a new Christian and Western context. Furthermore, other tectonic features, such as the application of blind arches on the facade with small windows and fretwork screens in Sicilian structures, are attributed to the skilled artisans and masters who translated Islamic aesthetics and design into an indigenous construction during the Muslim rule over Sicily. However, whether the artisans were trained in Islamic tradition or imported from Muslim lands close to Sicily, these masters were first executors of their superiors' plans, and second, builders of what they had seen in this Islamic tradition before translating them into the new structures. In short, the parallels between the domed monuments in Sicily and the ones in the region of North Africa, some 100 miles away from Sicily, underline the socio-political aspects of these multicultural structures and further the artistic exchanges between these coastal regions. More concluding statement here is regarding how San Cataldo is a point of intersection between Islamic architecture and Christian ideology, and what that means for the Normans and for Sicily. In other words, Squinches not only served as architectural solution for the transition from a square to a dome, but also communicated with a dominant Christian audience for the church and the multicultural residents of the medieval Sicily. Thank you.